Yes, you read that right. After several months of work and a lot of beating my head against the wall, finally, I made a combat system in Minecraft that doesn't suck, and it was not easy. At the beginning of all this, just my second video on this server, I made a video detailing my plans for combat, and it was... let's just say it could have been improved. To spare you the time of watching that video, the original plan was rather simple. I added better combat, parkour, iron spells and spellbooks, and simply swords. And, well, it was okay, if I'm being generous. It had several flaws, but to start, we'll just talk about why iron spells and spellbooks in particular was suboptimal. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an awesome mod, and after a series of events I'll explain later, I have crazy respect for whoever managed to make that, but unfortunately, it just wasn't right for my server. The problems with iron spells and spellbooks lie in a slew of things, but the most notable was just how wildly unbalanced it was to begin with. I wasn't afraid of obliterating some spells and tweaking configs, but that obviously wasn't the only issue. The elemental grouping in particular is an interesting theory and concept, but nigh impossible to actually pull off. This encourages making a build centered around your element of choosing, which is great, if it weren't so limiting. There were very clear metas for which class you should pick, making it not a question of self-expression, but whether or not you can get your hands on the best spells. I won't get into too much specifics of which things are broken because that would take a long time and God knows your attention span can't handle that. But I will say things like the black hole spell and just about any eldritch spell outclass everything else tenfold, making combat stale and rather uninteresting. Not to mention how Simply Swords, another great mod with the best of intentions, wasn't balanced in any right either. If I remember correctly, either the greatsword or the spear were just objectively the best weapons. Many of the unique weapons were also far too weak to truly be interesting, and some of the runes were also rather unbalanced. Most of the techniques and power in general for combat should be far more universal to make self-expression more of a factor in combat, but I didn't learn this until later. No, none of this crazy huge revamp started until far later into the development process. I even hosted a huge tournament for that last combat video, which I also did for this video, so stay tuned if you'd like to see it. But regardless, I still didn't really crack down on it, and combat stayed very half-baked. Until I received some pretty interesting suggestions. The first crack in the seams was when alternatives to magic systems were suggested. The most obvious flaw was our magic system, which, for reasons I explained earlier, we decided to be switched with Scripter Magicae, which was again later removed due to it lacking a good place in combat after some renovations I'll mention later. Things really started to roll when I was presented with different alternatives to Simply Swords, which was new to me since I never really played with anything else. I was skeptical at first, obviously, but after a lot of testing, Simply Swords proved to be too much, and these other alternatives were just way better. The question from there, however, was just, which one should I use? Then, the server went into a combat frenzy of sorts, and there was an arena built to test this out over and over and over and over again because the frequent changes in the brand new weapon mod, Weapon Works, made everything extremely interesting and very addictive. I just cannot express what a diamond in the rough Weapon Works is. It's perfect parts diversity and balance with some crazy amazing design decisions. I'll just run through all the weapons for you to give you a nice picture to help show you why I like this so much. To start, there's the Scythe. It has medium-high damage, medium range, and a medium attack speed. A very well-rounded and versatile weapon. And then the Warglaive is a super fast, super short range, and low damage weapon made to lock your opponent into a combo if you can wield it right. And of course the Greatsword is the ultimate heavy hitter, the longest attack cooldown and a medium range, but it's great for when you need to pack a particular punch to a strike. The Halberd is a long range heavy hitter, It does medium damage with a medium cooldown, but is great for striking your opponents as hard as you can from as far as you can. The hammer is like a more forgiving greatsword, which lets you use it more as a main weapon due to its shorter attack cooldown, but it suffers the curse of less damage. And then the spear is a long-range combo weapon, meant for keeping your enemies at a distance if comboing with the warglaive was maybe a bit too stressful for you. And the rapier is a mid-range combo weapon if you didn't like how either the glaive or the spear felt, but still want a combo-like playstyle. And then the katana is very similar to the scythe, but with a faster attack speed and shorter range. It's similar to a combo weapon, but it's more heavy. And then lastly, the mace is a heavy one-handed weapon, unlike every other weapon in this list besides the warglaive. Although it has medium damage with a high cooldown, its one-handedness makes it a great combo with a shield. The server went nuts over this, and everyone, myself included, couldn't stop playing it. This gave rise to some of the best PvPers in the server, most notably being Zinthbones, Rady, Arsenic, Frosty Tacos, and myself at the top. Although, this was all combat purely with just the weapons, which was fun, but we needed some more flavor. What I needed was the right mix of magic. Adding magic through items was simply not the right move. It clutters the hotbar, and most mods just make all the other weapons redundant. And since I had something so good going for the combat, I needed to complement it, not revamp it. So instead of adding this huge new magic mod, I decided to take a boring system in vanilla combat and give it new life. The system in question? Enchanting. Enchanting in vanilla Minecraft is absolutely awful for a wide variety of reasons. Every piece boils down to, how do I get the god armor for this piece? Nor are any of the enchantments interesting at all. The most interesting parts of the vanilla system were things like mending and infinity being incompatible, but that's about it. So instead of boring stat increases, I needed something better. More like abilities that you have to combine and master instead of throwing every enchant you possibly can onto the same piece. The only problem was, well, there was no mod that did that for me. So I went and did it myself. I learned to code for my very first mod, Igneo's Combat Revamp. This project has costed several months of my life, and man, was it worth it. With all the awesome ideas posted in the Discord server to sift through every inexplicable bug, and finding out that I had to rewrite the entire mod because I didn't understand networking yet, it spurred several sleepless nights that wound up creating the most entertaining combat system I've ever experienced. So this new theory was simple. Make brand new enchantments for every piece of equipment in order to emphasize and complement the parts of the game I find strongest. The biggest inspiration by far for this project specifically was Ultra Kill. This is because the combat in Ultra Kill is downright impeccable. The movement, the weapons, and most importantly the tech make such an engaging and powerful experience with a stunning skill curve. Besides the enemy design, which isn't exactly a variable in player-to-player combat, Ultra Kill's strength shines most in its tech, which is the number one thing I needed to emulate for a good combat system. Besides some enchantments that were almost blatantly stolen from this game, I took inspiration from Ultra Kill by leaning heavily on the idea of synergy between enchantments. I crafted 37 of these new enchantments, entirely made with synergy and combinations in mind, to make sure the combat feels like a fantasy medieval version of Ultra Kill. I also shook up the method of enchanting your items because the vanilla method was awful. The first thing I changed was the fact that all the enchantments you can enchant your item with were random. Now, instead of hoping for the enchantments you want, you unlock enchantments by placing an enchanted book into chiseled bookshelves around the table. As a side note, I also removed the anvil's increasing repair cost, since that was always absolutely ridiculous, so now the repair cost is always 2. I also removed the ability to enchant with the anvil to make sure you don't accidentally waste your precious books on it. So after gallons of my blood, sweat, and tears, here's what I finally made. First is the Tool enchantments, which keeps the vanilla one Silk Touch and adds Brut Touch, the only modded tool enchantment, making you mine at great speeds at the cost of not dropping blocks. Amazing for large build projects. Then we have the weapon enchantments. Backpedal is an enchantment for getting out of sticky situations quickly. It launches you backwards at a high velocity every time you crit. Blitz, an enchantment for combo weapons that increases your attack speed every time you hit your opponent, but watch out, because if you take too long to hit, or you take damage, you lose your progress entirely. And then there's Breakthrough, which is a weapon enchantment for breaking shields. Axes no longer have this functionality, and it has now been transferred to whatever weapon you have equipped that has this enchantment. Then, the Gust enchantment makes it so that whenever you crit with this weapon, you send your opponent flying into the air with a 2-second cooldown. Great for disorienting your opponent and alleviating some of the pressure off of yourself. And then Kinetic is for high-speed builds, dealing more damage the faster you move, which is great for synergizing with different enchantments and potions. And then Phantom Pain is a temporary direct damage increase. Every hit you deal does extra damage, but it heals back more than the extra damage you dealt, so be very careful with your risk and reward, or else this one will bite you. And Skewering is a Punisher enchantment. If your opponent is a bit too consistent with crits, pull this one out to stop them in their tracks, because it deals more damage to opponents in the air. And of course, Tempo Theft allows you to steal speed from your opponents up to 3 times, great for a burst build that needs a quick getaway. And then for crossbows, we have Mitosis, which makes your arrows split the longer they're in the air, making it a long-range shotgun of sorts. And then we have Rend, which makes all of your arrows deal 0 damage, but now when you left-click, they will detonate inside the target. Great for stopping your opponent in their tracks at a moment's notice, making it impossible to heal before you instantly kill them. And also Scatter, which turns your crossbow into a short-distance shotgun, dealing up to 15 damage if you hit all of your arrows. And then for bows, there's Accelerate, which cranks your arrows up to super speeds, shattering it into 1,000 pieces, piercing everything up to roughly 20 blocks, dealing significant knockback at the cost of less damage. There's also Phasing, which imbues your arrow with ghostly energy, allowing it to phase through blocks and entities without as much damage sacrifice as Accelerate. And of course, Whistler, which allows you to control your arrow mid-flight with the direction you're looking, which sounds like a direct upgrade, but the arrow moves slower and is much harder to aim. It does more damage than a normal arrow though. And then for Trident enchantments, all Tridents automatically have Loyalty, and we keep Riptide from vanilla. Then I added Extract, which pulls your enemy towards you on hit, and then Recoil, which launches you in the opposite direction when you shoot it. Then for Helmet enchantments, we have Black Hole, which shoots out, you guessed it, a black hole from your skull, drawing all entities besides you towards it and dealing damage if they touch it. Great for keeping pressure on your opponents. And then there's Blizzard, which shoots out a barrage of low damage icicles that freeze your opponent temporarily on hit. It's crazy good as a utility, especially if you need a still opponent for a nasty combo. Flamethrower will shoot out a ton of fireballs, dealing 10 damage to any entity that they may hit, and lighting the ground it hits on fire. Great for area denial at far ranges, and amazing for damage up close. There's also Smite, which launches you into the air, letting you shoot 3 lightning bolts. It does some crazy good damage, assuming you can hit your shots. And Warden Scream is pretty self-explanatory, but it releases a sonic shriek from your head with the shortest helmet cooldown. It has the highest DPS if you hit every scream. Then, for chestplate enchantments, we have Concussion, which knocks your opponent into the air, dealing 5 damage, and then making them fall slower. Great for use with Skewering. Flare charges up a huge explosion where you stand, slowing you down a lot, and dealing a ton of damage after you explode. Just be careful, since parry can block this completely. And of course, as I just stated, there's also Parry, which will let you block the next instance of damage entirely if you time it right. And then Siphoning, which allows you to use your armor durability to heal in case all your other forms of healing are running dry. As well as Warden Spine, which lets you trade your vision for strength, giving you the blindness effect and applying a strength buff. Then, for Leggings, we have Acrobatic, which gives you a boost when you flip, as well as a damage reduction before you hit the ground. Great for those who like parkour a lot and want new, unique ways to play with that right now. Next is Crush, which will send you plummeting to the ground and exploding if you fell more than 3.5 blocks. Incapacitate stops all players around you for a fraction of a second. Very useful for combos you need a still enemy for, even if it's just for a small bit. Judgment sends you lunging forward, exploding on the first enemy you hit, great as both a movement and a damage tool. Train Dash sends you dashing forward uncontrollably, exploding on contact with every enemy and dealing a self-damage explosion if you hit a block or slow down too much. And of course, we have our boot enchants, starting with Comet Strike that lets you summon a comet out of the ground that retains the property of what it was hit with. The more damage it takes, the bigger it explodes on impact. Double Jump is rather self-explanatory, and Momentum makes it so that the longer you sprint, the bigger speed buff you get, with a cap of 3 buffs, great for sustained running and large bursts of damage with Kinetic. And then Sky Charge lets you store energy in your crouch, launching you upwards on release. Great as a get-out-of-jail-free card when you find yourself cornered and keeping yourself out of sight of the opponent. And lastly, Stonecaller places 4 blocks of stone underneath your feet, allowing you to take advantage of the sudden high ground with a devastating crush attack, or just using it as temporary cover. But no, I didn't stop at enchantments, which were already fantastic as they were. I also added various buffs to trims. Now, I know you might be saying to yourself, but the entire point of trims was to be cosmetic, which is valid, but we installed cosmetic armor as well to allow you to still express yourself through the design. In fact, many of the vanilla enchantments were actually re-added through trims. We'll start with Coast, which makes it so that you run out of air slower, or more specifically, gives you the vanilla enchantment Respiration effect. There's also Dune, which will increase your gravity and make it harder to knock you around. Eye, which will give you magic and magic adjacent protection. Host gives you overall protection at the cost of movement speed. Razor gives you jump boost. Rib gives you fire protection. Sentry gives you more knockback but less protection. Shaper reduces the impact of larger hits. Silence gives you a direct damage boost at the cost of attack speed. Snout increases your attack speed. Spire decreases fall damage. Tide gives you Depth Strider. Vex gives you projectile protection. Ward gives you explosion protection. Wayfinder gives you a speed buff. And Wild gives you a health boost. And finally, with the hardest part out of the way, I simply integrated potions into the mix, and I finally have a worthy combat system in Minecraft that plays similarly to Ultra Kill. With a beautiful skill ceiling and interesting combinations to boot it up, I decided to host one last arena to get some demonstration in and to finally put an end to this absolute monster of a subject. Let the games begin! Each contestant gets 5 minutes to suit up and prepare for their battle in the armory. The tournament operates by standard rules with random match placement with some bias to assure there aren't many fights like... There will be the first 2 elimination rounds, then semifinals, and then finals, as well as a secret encounter for the winner. Our first 2 contestants were Mr. Yeetman and the Flaming Sword. And just like that, the first round instantly goes to Mr. Yeetman, but then again, the second one didn't go much better for the Flaming Sword. which means Mr. Yeetman successfully advances to the next level of the tournament, and the fight now looks over to Echolotl versus the Taco King. And of course, it was a complete sweep by Echolotl, allowing him to move on to the next round. This moves us on to our next fight, Frosty Tacos versus Deus. With yet another full sweep, it looks like it was quite a futile effort to arrange the brackets in a way that avoided. Although there is one more bracket to go through for the last of the first of the elimination brackets. Please introduce Zinthbones and Ready Set Robot. And of course, another full sweep and instant win for Zinthbones, which allows us to close up the first of the elimination rounds and move on to Mega B versus Mr. Yeetman. And of course, despite Mr. Yeetman's crushing victory in the last round, Megaby absolutely destroyed him in this one, pushing him on to the next bracket. Next up, we have Echolotl versus Morphes. And oh so surprisingly, Echolotl takes the crown on this match and moves on to the semifinals. Our next round includes Trevin Spad versus Frosty Tacos. Okay, so that was the first battle that took more than 2 rounds, and I just lost a lot of money. I don't know about you, but Trevin Spad, with some stroke of luck, managed to beat Frosty Tacos and now gets to move on to the semifinals. Next, we have Zinthbones and Arsenic. And judging from the outcome of that fight, it looks like the only thing going up is Arsenic's death count. Anyway, now that we are finally finished with the elimination rounds, we can finally move on to the semi-finals, where our first fight is Megabee versus Echolotl. And now that the weak is weeded out from the strong, the fights actually seem to get interesting. So we'll start with a bit of analysis for this one. So if we take a quick look at Megabee's inventory here, we can see that they're wearing Warden Scream on the helmet, Flare on the chest plate, Incapacitate on the leggings, and Double Jump on the boots, as well as their weapons enchanted with Tempo Theft on the scythe, as well as Breakthrough on the rapier. Megabee also seems to carry a bunch of Turtle Master potions, as you can see on the left, and some cobwebs in order to halt your movement. Megabee runs the Ultimate Punisher loadout, meaning if you make one wrong move, be a bit too aggressive or too defensive, Megabee has the ultimate loadout in order to completely destroy you. Meaning one wrong move, and you're done. So if we take a look at Echolotl's inventory here, we can see that he's running Flamethrower on the helmet, Concussion on the chest plate, Judgment on the leggings, and Momentum on the boots. On the weapons, he has Phantom Pain for his greatsword and Breakthrough for the hammer. As you can tell, Echolotl runs a very high damage, high speed build. So his whole goal during the fight is to get up close to the opponent and deal as much damage as possible, as fast as possible. So without further ado, let's get this party started. Now, as you could probably tell, Echo got ruined here, and if you really paid attention to my inventory analysis, you can probably deduce why. The biggest leg up Mega B has on the competition is their Turtle Master potions. Not because they're OP, but because it's a unique strategy no one has experienced against. This is super important later, but Mega B plays in a way that makes rushing him the worst idea you could have. Echo's entire build and playstyle is focused entirely on rushing. This is the equivalent of fighting water with fire. Mega B uses Flare and the Turtle Master potions to make any poor soul that tries no further than bum rush tactics to get instantly obliterated in a fiery explosion. However, should the victim try running away upon activation, Mega B swiftly strikes with the Tempo Theft Scythe to hinder their movement and force them to take the blow. In hindsight, the battle was over long before it even began. So, with Mega B moving on to the final round, we now have our last fight to determine who's going to face him. Trevin Spad versus Zinthbones. So let's go ahead and take a look at Trevin Spad's inventory here. On the helmet, he has Warden Scream, chestplate is Parry, leggings are Judgment, and boots are Momentum. And on his one greatsword, he has Breakthrough. He also carries a wide variety of potions like Speed, Regeneration, Turtle Master, and Fire Resistance, as well as some Cobwebs. So he doesn't seem to have quite the cohesive build, but the general playstyle seems to be fairly aggressive. And now if we analyze Zinth, we can see that he's running Flamethrower on the helmet, Parry on the chestplate, Judgment on the leggings, and Sky Charge on the boots, as well as Kinetic on his greatsword, Tempo Theft on his spear and offhand sword, Rend on his crossbows, Gust on his other sword, and Extract on the trident. Zinth's whole plan is to strike as hard as he can, as fast as he can, in order to get you to run away into the flames he's setting with Flamethrower around the arena. He deals as much damage as he can to put stress on you so that he can instantly hit you with a Sky Charge and Judgment Strike, ruining you instantly. So let's see how this one plays out. Now, I know I promised an analysis for every fight, but considering that the second one took 16 seconds, it's pretty clear that it was just a better player with a better build. So congratulations to Trevin for getting this far, but Zinth took the prize on this one. So all we have left to do now is the finals, with Mega B versus Zinthbones. Now, you already know their builds and playstyles, so it's up to you whether you think Zinth's hyper-aggressive, high-damage build will beat out Mega B's more balanced and thoughtful build. And quite quickly, Zinth falls. But don't worry, his ego stays intact. Zinth fell into the same trap everyone else before him did. His hyper-aggressive nature was easily punished by Megabee's unique build and skillful battlefield intuition. So congratulations to Megabee for victory in the tournament. But it's not over yet. Seeing Megabee's incredible skill, I had to get a taste of this combat prowess. That's right, this secret encounter is me. So I geared up and headed into the armory for the fight of my life. There, right there. Did you see that? I didn't notice this at the time, but that was a Turtle Master potion. You see what's there in the right side of my hotbar all the way at the end there? That's splash milk. That would have let me remove the Turtle Master effect from him, and if you saw his health, that would have killed him instantly. This was an incredibly fatal blunder. I would have won the match right there. But, of course I didn't notice that he used the Turtle Master potion. With a massive blow from Word and Scream and a consecutive strike with a scythe, I have fallen. I used up a lot of my health potions there, so my resources are running fairly low. I'm in trouble. This defeat was humbling, and I now know I have to bring my A game if I really want to beat this guy. Last second I managed to pull in a win that round, but at the cost of every single one of my potions. Mega B and I are head to head here, 1-1. This match is best 3 out of 5, so both of us need 2 more wins in order to be crowned Ultimate Champion. Now, this fight I lost instantly, and although I broke his helmet, due to a strange bug in my mod, it let him keep the ability. He still has potions, and I'm completely lacking in all resources. Things are not looking good for me. after losing 20% of my body weight in sweat, I managed to take home the prize on this one by utilizing both my judgment and concussion enchantments. Now he no longer has access to any of his potions, and through a lot of really stressful tactical decisions, the playing field is back in my favor. So with my newfound leg up, I need to make sure I don't get too comfortable in order to keep my crown of best PvPer on the server. With one heart left, I did it! Quite narrowly, but I survived, the game being won by a hair. Saved by the power of Smite, I live another day, nearly beaten by the very monsters I've created. Do you think Mega B would have beaten me if he remembered to repair his armor? Or do you think I would have wiped the floor with him if I knew about his Turtle Master strategy earlier in the fight? Well, if you want to see Mega B and I have a proper rematch, let me know and I can get on that, but as the tournament stands, Mega B is crowned victor, and I retain my number 1 position. Now, did that combat look awesome to you or what? If it didn't, feel free to tell me why. I read every last one of your comments. But if it did look awesome, I recommend you subscribe, because this isn't even half of the awesome stuff I have planned for my server here. If you really like my work, then I ask you support me on Ko-fi, since every dime I make on this, another hour I get to spend working on this behemoth of a project. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.